as we're heading into my final breeding group of 2019 and my final lambing group of 2019, I realized that I have done a lot of videos on all the steps that it requires, from weaning to breeding to maintenance and to management, and then all the way to lambing. I have a lot of videos about lambing, but lambing is like, it's like a wedding day. It's the final step of a lot of steps that have been done to get ready and be prepared. But I realized that I've never actually put it all together into one video. My entire accelerated lambing system, how I set it up, how I plan it, how I schedule it, how I actually do it, and then what did the results look like. I thought in this video I would talk about all the steps between when I wean a ewe to when she comes back into lamb again. I'm gonna start actually at the end of lambing, which is the weaning period. I wean at 8 weeks. At weaning time, I sort the lambs and the mums out. The mums stay in this barn. The lambs get put on my trailer and they just go for a quick ride right across the road to our finishing barn. What I do after weaning is I go through my Gallagher and I mark down any weaning issues that I've seen at their first weaning weight sessions. I also analyze any data that I've collected along the way, whether it's did the lamb die in between birth and weaning, do I know the reason behind the death, and I also use the data I collected at birth. I write down a lot of stuff right when those lambs are born, and if there's anything that really comes to my attention, then those ewes are marked to really evaluate hard and maybe perhaps ship. The other thing I do at weaning time, 7 to 10 days before I wean the lambs off the ewes, I also start the drying off process, which means I change their feed ration. So they go more to a maintenance ration, which is quite literally, if I have dry hay in inventory, I will just feed them dry hay and some mineral. That's it. It actually makes the lamb eat more creep. They're on that creep feed hardcore by that time, and then when you transfer the lambs over to the finishing barn, there's not that stress because they've been eating quite well, drinking out of a pail, drinking out of the water bowl, because mom just isn't producing enough milk to keep them satisfied. So then by the time I wean the lambs off, the ewes have already been on their dry hay. They stay on that dry hay ration, or I might start mixing in haylage at that point for the next 4 weeks. So they stay on a maintenance ration for the next 4 weeks. After this time, I actually start sorting my ewes based on the weaning data that I have, and also after they're dried off, I do a real hardcore udder evaluation. Okay, I've got the ewes moved into position. They're in the chase, and I have this set up so anything that has issues is going to go into this holding pen, and the rest will get evaluated and then they will go back into their pen. So here's my little area where I do the recording. I use my Gallagher, I have my sheet all ready to go. First of all, I'm going to evaluate all the udders, so I'm literally going to take my hand and palpate the udder just to see if there's any lumps or anything wrong with them, and even kind of feel the teats to see if there's any hardness. So right away, this first one has, it's a big udder. It's kind of hanging pretty low for what I like to see, and it's also got a few little lumps. I don't know if I can show you, but I'm gonna try. So it's pretty low, and you see those little lumps right there? Yeah, so they're pretty, I'm gonna definitely mark her to go. She's not hard, like it feels like she nursed fine, but I'm just really unsure about those. So I'm just not gonna take any chances. after all the ewes have been sorted and marked for shipping, the ones that stay now become a new breeding group. 2 to 3 weeks before I want them bred, I actually changed them to a flush ration. I talked a little bit about this in my last video. So basically I'm increasing the energy and protein just to really get that ewe to feel a change from being on that dry ration or that maintenance ration to being on a higher plane of nutrition. During this whole flushing process, I sit down on my computer and I figure out my breeding groups. Who do I want bred to who? And I keep it pretty simple because I'm not a purebred operation, I'm commercial. So I'm really just organizing, I put them in breeding groups based on sire breed, not on single sire mating. It keeps it a bit simple. Any replacement ewes that I have back for another year, I'll see who their sire is, and it's basically just a breed. So if it's a Suffolk sired ewe lamb replacement, I will make sure it doesn't get put with the Suffolk to get bred for her babies. Trying to keep daughters and daddies apart. And I do that based on breed. The other thing I do during this flush time period is decide, am I breeding them naturally or am I breeding them with the help of CEDARs and PMSG? 3 times of the year so far, I am using the help of CEDARs and PMSG because the lambing part of this whole system also overlaps with field work. So that's, for me, that's my part-time job. For you guys, I'm sure a lot of sheep farmers out there have another job. So I use CEDARs to time and synchronize and make my lambing groups tight. That is why I use them. In the summer, I also use them a little bit to help with that whole ovulation process. So I do use CEDARs and PMSG for 3 of the groups, but my in-season breeding, I do not. So the group that I'm going to be breeding next, they will actually be bred naturally. So my breeding itself, between the time when that ewe is weaned to the time that she's bred again, is about a 6-week period. That might change a little bit, but that's the glory of actually planning your lambing schedule. You can figure out where it fits best in your life. Okay, so breeding. I breed 4 times a year right now. The flock is 450 ewes. I've got it broke down into 3 groups. My breeding groups so far are January, April, July, and October. Again, like I said, October is a natural breed, and the rest of them are with the use of CEDARs. During this period, I will continue those ewes on that flush ration, so that higher energy, higher protein, a little bit higher protein. And if I'm adding the rams to my CEDAR group, I've done it both ways. I've put them in immediately after I've pulled CEDARs, and I've also waited 24 hours. I kind of judge by what those rams are doing. If they're chasing like crazy and running around and really stressing out those ewes, I'll pull them back out and I'll wait. So it's better when those ewes are really starting to have a standing heat, and then the rams don't get burnout and there's no injury if they're really chasing hard. I will leave the rams with the ewes. In the CEDAR program, in 2019, I left them in for 21 days. So that will cover 2 cycles, because in theory, the CEDAR makes them, if they're gonna come into heat, they will all come into heat on day 1. I know I'm capturing the first cycle, and also day 17 is the beginning of their second cycle, and they're done by day 21. Naturally, I have to give them 34 days because those ewes can be anywhere in their cycle when I put in those rams, because I haven't timed it. So a ewe could be on day one and I could catch her right away. So that's awesome. But I could have another ewe that's on like day 19. So I've missed her first cycle. I've got to wait 17 days for her to catch her first cycle. Plus I have to wait the second 17 days to catch a second cycle if I want 2 cycles covered, which I do. Okay, the next whole part of the system is the early gestation. So this is when I'm assuming all the ewes are pregnant, not necessarily pregnant, and I don't really know that until they get scanned. They will stay on the flush ration for another 4 weeks. So they are getting fed really, really well. So it is pretty imperative that their breeding works, because if they don't, my ewes can get over-conditioned fast. If I have to give them another chance, if they don't conceive, those ewes are big. I'm really trying to get those conception rates up, because it just makes for not a very good ewe going down the road for a repeat chance to breed. After that, I will change back to the dry or the maintenance ration, so they're only getting basically haylage and some mineral, and that's about it. A very low energy, low protein, as low as you can get for just that maintenance period. 6 weeks after I take out the rams is when I'll scan the ewes, and I showed that on my last video when Rebecca came and we scanned, that group we scanned 178 ewes, and then you figure out how many are open, how many are pregnant, and even with that, she can actually tell me how many are having twins or triplets or singles, so it just helps me prepare. Any ewes that miss when Rebecca's here, so any of that are open, if it's their second time they were open, I just can't afford to keep them. So unless it's a really good excuse or a really good reason, or it's something that I did, I will probably ship them at that point. If it's their first miss, I will try to breed them one more time. I always give the ewes 2 chances, just in case it's something just fluke or luck or something that I missed. Okay, that ewe she had 2 marks on her back. So I went to her history here, and I noticed that she was indeed open at scan. Go back to collect, and I'm going to write ship. So now I'm shipping her. So I wrote that right there. That is how I sort. So all the ones with the red stripes, the single red stripes, are gonna go back with my ewes that I weaned a few weeks ago. They're gonna go and join that group. And I believe I only have 1 shipping, just her, and she gets put that way to flex back in, because I'm gonna load them up on the truck when we're done here. So if the ewes are pregnant, this is when the new lambing group begins, and that is where my management changes. So my management now becomes, this is hardcore, we are preparing for that wedding day, we're preparing for that lambing day. So at 6 to 8 weeks prior to lambing, I will shear the ewes. So I get Charlie in to come and shear all the ewes destined to lamb. And what that does, I do it basically for animal health. I get that weight off them, get the dirt off them, and especially in that udder area, the udder and the belly. It just helps also for those lambs to find those teats easier, and it also gives me a chance to really evaluate those ewes. He's got them kind of at every angle, and he even sometimes catches things that I don't see. So it's nice to have that second set of eyes sometimes. The next thing I do at about 6 weeks prior to when they lamb is I hoof trim and I vaccinate them. So in the past I've been doing a Tasvax clostridial vaccination, and that's worked fine, but what I'm finding in my flock, I've got a little bit of caseus. I'm not going to try to pronounce it, but CL we call it. So my protocol going forward, I started this in 2019. All my ewe lambs that were born in 2019 are starting to, I've switched to a clostridial vaccine that also protects against CL, and it's called Glanvac. So at this point in their pregnancy, I give a shot, whatever it is, a clostridial vaccine, 6 weeks before those ewes are to have babies. Now this can be 4 to 6 weeks, because I'm never, if it's the second cycle that these ewes are due, then it still would equal 6 weeks. But I like to aim for 6 weeks before that ewe has her baby. So that's kind of the goal of the vaccination, is to vaccinate mom with a booster so it goes to the baby through her milk. That flush ration that I used for a couple weeks before I bred them, and then through that whole breeding process, I actually switched them back to that ration again. So that ration actually doubles as my flush ration plus my late gestation ration. Again, increased plan of nutrition. Those lambs are growing so fast in those last few weeks of pregnancy, like exponentially. A ewe is pregnant for 5 months. There's a lot of critical things that happen in the very beginning of her pregnancy, and not a lot in the middle, and then a lot at the end. That's where they're putting on a ton of weight. They're putting on all their critical things and also that lung development. So it's very important you keep up with nutrition. Nutrition in those last couple weeks is so vital to a good, healthy, uniform litter of lambs if you have more than one, for sure. I also clean out the barn. So the pen that I always have destined for every lambing group is the pens on the south side of the barn. It's a little bit warmer side of the barn. It's closest to my utility room and a warm room and water. So I will make sure the manure gets taken out, it gets cleaned up, bedded up, and I might even a week before they're due is start setting up my claiming pens. I usually try to plan to have all that stuff done about 2 weeks before they're due to lamb, because these lambs, for me, I expect these lambs to start popping at around 140 days pregnant. So they're supposed to be 145, but what I'm finding is I easily get some lambs a week early than what I'm expecting. Okay, so the last part of the cycle gets all the glory. Really no mention of all the work that gets done before the couple weeks of chaos, which is lambing. I lamb in September, December, March, and June. Most of the lambs do actually lamb in those first 7 days, majority, 7 to 10 days. And then the rest are kind of the stragglers. For the most part, that big chaos lambing is they typically catch in their first cycle. I switched to a lactating ration. This is a high octane because they are producing milk. Most of these ewes have 2 lambs on them. Some of them might even have 3. Some of them have singles. The singles do quite well and demand a lot of milk. So I am treating these ewes basically like a dairy cow. It's a balanced ration. My feed guy works for me. They go through my feed analysis and they see how to make that ewe the best performer she possibly can. The mums and the babies go in those claiming pens for 24 hours after they're born. That's so they can bond. Little baby lambs can't see very well, so they really have to rely on their smell and the sound. So when I put them in their little pens, mom and baby can really bond. And it's also the time I can observe mom and observe babies. I check their udders for milk or any problems. I check their teats to make sure there is milk. Sometimes I even test their colostrum, which is really cool. But for the most part, it's just that observation. And then the second day at the 24-hour mark before I let them out into the bigger group, I will tag the lambs. So I will give her an RFID tag, and that's a scannable tag. And then I can track that lamb all the way through her life, whether that's to market eventually or back into my barn as a replacement animal. So it's pretty cool. I can track her from the moment she's born. That is the process from weaning, breeding, lambing, and back to weaning again. Now I want to head to the office and go through what those results look like in 2019. Okay, it's been all day since I got to actually looking at my numbers. What I want to share with you is just the results of, you know, how many did I breed that would lamb in 2019? How many got bred? What did the scans look like? You know, how accurate were those scans? And how many lambed at the end of the day? I'm actually going to do the scans first. So my group 1 in 2018, so they were bred in October, I had 213 in that group that were scanned and 198 were pregnant. So that was a really good scan, but they were bred naturally. So if a ewe is in good condition and has been, you know, fed well, health-wise they're good, they should scan well. So that one, I mean, I'm always very, very grateful and happy when I have a good scan, but most people would expect that from a in-season breeding. The second one I bred in January and I had 118 in that group. Now this one I was shocked at. I had 113 confirmed pregnant, so that was a 96%. That was the best I've ever had, actually. And that group was ceded, and that group, over half of them were first-time ewes. So that was a huge shock to me. Group 3 was bred in April, so that would have been, so far we've done an October, January, and group 3 was April this year, and only 92 in that group. And this one, surprisingly, was my worst scan at 70%, so only 64 out of 92 were confirmed pregnant on that one. And then group 1, is the group that I talked about in last week's video. So they're due in December. They were bred in July. And there was 178 in that group, and 143 of them were confirmed pregnant, so that was an 80% scan. So overall, between October 2018 and July 2019, all those scanned groups, I had 601 ewes scanned and 518 were confirmed pregnant. So that was an 86% for the whole year confirmed pregnancies, which for me, it's huge. And it's a little bit of a report card for me. I'm really proud of that. It didn't come easy. I had a lot of really crappy years up to this, so this was a really nice thing to see this year. So far, 349 ewes have lambed. There's 143 left in this December group coming up. So if say they all lamb, which they won't, because some lose their lambs early in their pregnancies that Rebecca doesn't see on her scan. But if they did all lamb, that would be 492 out of the 518 confirmed pregnancies this year, which would be a 95% accuracy on those scans. So, which I think is well worth the money. So a lot of people don't want to spend the money on ultrasounds thinking that they're not accurate. And I think if you do it in the time that your ultrasound technician tells you, so I always know exactly when I put those rams in, I know exactly when they come out. So I know for sure how pregnant within a range that those ewes would be. And Rebecca does like to scan my ewes around 6 weeks post ram removal. So I think that helps with the accuracy of what she wants to see. Even more so if you want to see singles, twins, triplets, all that stuff, then it's really important to make sure you listen to your ultrasound technician and do your best into scheduling when they come to actually do the scan. That is my lambing system, our accelerated system. It's not a true accelerated system. Every ewe has the opportunity to have lambs every 9 months. Those 3 groups in a year, the first group will have a chance to you know, get bred twice in that calendar year or lamb twice in that calendar year. So I hope that helps. What do you guys do? Comment below. Do you lamb annually or do you lamb on an accelerated system throughout the year? I would love to see how globally, how either we're very different or even where there's some similarities in certain climates and certain areas that are maybe a lot more closely related to here in Canada. So let me know in the comments below, because I am super interested to see how everyone else is doing their sheep farming. Thanks for watching. We will be back in the fields. I just wanted to touch base and do some sheep videos for the people that have been with me from the get-go. I hope this doesn't come off as me trying to tell you what to do or how to run your farm. I very much want people to do what works for them and what makes them happy and what makes them manage at their very, very best. For me, this is the way I do it, and it feels good when the report card tells me that all the work that I'm doing is worth something. So thank you for watching. Have a good one.